My sister's 8-year-old kid threw a silver fork dripping with hot gravy right at my chest. The heavy metal hit my collarbone with a sickening thud, leaving a dark, greasy stain spreading rapidly across my favorite cream sweater. He pointed a sticky, unwashed finger at me and laughed a sharp, mocking sound that echoed relentlessly through the massive dining room. "Mom says you are just a servant. You do not belong at the main table." That was what he yelled at the top of his lungs. For 2 agonizing seconds, the entire room went dead silent. I waited for my sister to scold him. I waited for my mother to gasp in horror and correct her spoiled grandson. Instead, my brother-in-law chuckled. My mother giggled behind her expensive linen napkin. And my sister, sipping her costly red wine, just smirked and told me to know my place. They treated me like dirt. They humiliated me in front of 30 people. What none of them knew, what my sister had desperately hidden from every single person sitting at that very table, was the $542,000 secret resting quietly in my pocket. They thought I was a pathetic loser. They had no idea I was the only reason they were not living out of cardboard boxes on the street. The morning of Thanksgiving started with a heavy, oppressive gray sky hanging over the city. I woke up at 5 o'clock. Spending 3 long hours in my kitchen baking my signature pecan pie and a massive batch of artisan dinner rolls from scratch. I am a senior underwriter for commercial sureties. My daily life consists of dealing with massive corporate bonds, strict financial contracts, analyzing risk, and allowing zero margin for error. Baking is my therapy. It is precise, it requires patience, but unlike my job, it yields something warm and comforting. I carefully packed the freshly baked food into thermal boxes, ensuring they would stay warm for the drive, and loaded them into the trunk of my car, bracing my nerves for the annual psychological torture that is family dinner at my sister Fallon's house. Fallon is 35, 3 years older than me, and runs a boutique fitness studio that barely breaks even on a good month. But if you scroll through her social media feeds, you would think she is a self-made millionaire living a life of endless luxury. She lives in a sprawling 4-bedroom suburban house with a perfectly manicured lawn, a huge paved driveway, and a front porch decorated with elaborate seasonal wreaths that probably cost more than my first used car. As I pulled into her upscale neighborhood, my anxiety spiked. I saw her massive driveway was already packed front to back with luxury SUVs belonging to her wealthy friends and her husband's extended family. There was no space left for me. I had to park 3 blocks away on a steep hill, out in the freezing November wind, carrying the heavy thermal boxes all by myself while wearing high heels. When I finally reached the grand front door, my fingers were numb and my breath was visible in the cold air. I rang the brass doorbell. My mother, Maura, opened the door. She was wearing a tailored silk blouse and a string of genuine pearls, looking like the picture-perfect suburban matriarch ready for a magazine photo shoot. Her face lit up with a massive smile for a fraction of a second before she realized it was just me standing there on the welcome mat. "Oh, it is you, Sloane," she sighed, her bright smile dropping instantly into a frown of disappointment. "You're late. The turkey has been resting for an hour. People are getting hungry." "I am not late, Mom." The invitation clearly said dinner was called for 4. "It is 3:45 right now," I replied, stepping inside the warm foyer and trying to balance the awkward boxes in my frozen hands. She did not offer to take a single box or help me with my coat. Instead, she took my jacket with a dramatic sigh and pointed a manicured finger toward the back of the house. "Put those in the kitchen. And while you are in there, wash the appetizer plates stacked in the sink. Your sister is so stressed out trying to host all these important people. You always have so much free time since you do not have a family of your own. Just help her out. Be useful for once today." I swallowed the bitter lump forming in my throat. I work 60 grueling hours a week managing multi-million-dollar accounts. Fallon works maybe 20 hours a week yelling at housewives to pedal faster on stationary bikes. But in my mother's distorted reality, Fallon is a fragile, overworked princess carrying the weight of the world on her delicate shoulders, and I am just the sturdy, boring, emotionless mule meant to carry the heavy luggage. I walked down the long hallway into the massive kitchen. It smelled intensely of roasted sage, melted butter, and Fallon's overpowering, expensive floral perfume. Fallon was standing by the massive marble island, wearing a designer silk dress that hugged her perfectly, holding a crystal wine glass filled to the brim. She was chatting loudly with her husband, Declan, a guy who peaked playing high school football and now sells HVAC equipment to local businesses. "Oh good, the help has finally arrived," Fallon joked to Declan, not even turning her head to look at me. "Sloane, the sink is overflowing. Do not use the abrasive sponge on the good china. You scratched a plate last year, and I had to replace the whole set." I set my carefully baked goods on a side counter. They were immediately pushed aside by Declan to make room for a generic, store-bought cheese platter still wrapped in plastic. I rolled up the sleeves of my sweater and turned on the hot water. I have always been the invisible child in this family, the permanent scapegoat. I learned early in my childhood that fighting back only made the abuse worse. If I defended myself, they would gaslight me, call me crazy, tell me I was too sensitive, and somehow make Fallon the victim. So, I learned to stay quiet. I focused on my education, built my career, saved every penny I earned, and lived a quiet, drama-free life in a stunning penthouse downtown that my family knows nothing about. They think I rent a cramped, depressing studio apartment in a bad neighborhood. I let them believe that lie because their condescending pity is vastly easier to manage than their parasitic greed. Just as I started scrubbing the hardened grease off a serving platter, the kitchen doors swung open and our cousin Kieran walked in. Kieran is a real estate agent. He is loud, flashy, wears suits that are too tight, and measures a person's entire worth by their zip code and their car brand. "Fallon, Declan," he boomed, spreading his arms wide as if he owned the place. I was just admiring the custom crown molding in the main hallway. The housing market in this specific neighborhood is insane right now. This place has to be worth at least $700,000 by now. You guys are sitting on an absolute gold mine. Declan, your business must be booming to afford a monthly mortgage on this palace. Declan shifted his weight uncomfortably, his face turning a slight shade of pink. "Yeah, well, we do all right for ourselves," he mumbled, taking a large, nervous gulp of his beer and avoiding eye contact. Fallon quickly stepped in, tossing her perfectly styled hair over her shoulder and flashing a dazzling smile. "Oh, you know us, Kieran. We work incredibly hard for the finer things in life. We just wanted the best possible environment for our kids to grow up in. Not everyone is satisfied with living paycheck to paycheck in some tiny, depressing city box, right, Sloane?" She shot a nasty, sideways glance at me. Kieran laughed, a loud, obnoxious sound that grated on my nerves. "Right. Well, we cannot all be winners in this family. Keep scrubbing those dishes, Sloane. Maybe one day you can afford a fancy dishwasher like Fallon's if you save up your pennies." I kept my hands submerged in the scalding soapy water. I did not say a single word. I just stared out the kitchen window at the dying autumn leaves falling onto the pristine lawn. A bitter, cold smile crept onto my lips. Kieran was praising Declan for his immense success. He was admiring Fallon's incredible wealth. If they only knew the truth. If they only knew the massive, devastating financial secret I held over their heads. The tension was building heavily in my chest, a dark storm brewing fiercely behind my ribs. I knew this dinner was going to be a disaster, but I had no idea how far they were willing to push me today. Will I let them walk all over me again? How much longer can I pretend to be the weak, struggling sister before I finally snap? The steaming hot water ran continuously over my hands, turning my knuckles a bright, angry red. I scrubbed the stubborn remains of baked spinach dip off a heavy porcelain plate, the repetitive, rhythmic motion doing absolutely nothing to calm the wild racing of my heart. Being back in this house, surrounded by their loud voices and fake laughter, always felt like walking through a heavily curated museum of my own personal pain. Every corner of this family dynamic held an exhibit of my humiliation, a brightly lit display case of the times I was violently pushed down just so Fallon could stand a little taller and shine a little brighter. My mind drifted back forcefully to 10 years ago. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, exhausted to my bones working 2 grueling minimum wage jobs just to save up for a decent, reliable used car. I desperately needed that car to commute to a demanding entry-level finance job I had fought tooth and nail to secure against hundreds of applicants. Over 2 years, I had painstakingly saved $4,000. It took 24 months of eating nothing but cheap ramen noodles, wearing thrift store clothes, and skipping every single social event my friends invited me to. Then, Fallon decided out of nowhere that she wanted to open a high-end boutique flower shop in the trendy part of town. She had no business plan, zero retail experience, no supplier contacts, just a colorful Pinterest board and a delusional dream of being a business owner. My mother sat me down on the faded sofa in our childhood living room, her face stern and unyielding. "Sloan, your sister needs initial seed money for her grand opening," she had said, her tone leaving zero room for negotiation or argument. "You need to give her your car fund. All of it." "Mom, I need that car for my new job starting next month," I pleaded, a cold panic rising rapidly in my throat. "I have to commute an hour each way on the highway. I cannot do that on public transit." "You can take the city bus," Maura snapped, crossing her arms. "Fallon has a real creative vision. She is an entrepreneur building a legacy. You are just doing mindless data entry in a cubicle. Family helps family, Sloan. Do not be so incredibly selfish when your sister is trying to better herself." I broke down and gave her the money. I took 3 different buses for 2 more years, waking up at 4 in the morning just to make it to my desk on time. Fallon's glamorous flower shop went completely bankrupt in less than 4 months because she spent half the budget on rare imported orchids she did not know how to keep alive, and the other half on a massive custom neon sign with her name on it. She never paid me back a single dime. My mother never brought it up again, pretending the entire failure never happened. That was Exhibit 1 in my museum of pain. I reached for another dirty plate, the anger simmering a little hotter in my veins now. Exhibit 2 happened 4 years ago. I was 28. After years of grinding, I had just been promoted to senior underwriter. It was a massive, life-changing leap. It meant a 6-figure salary, generous corporate stock options, and real, tangible authority in a male-dominated field. I was so incredibly proud of myself. I invited my parents and Fallon's entire family to a beautiful, highly rated restaurant in the city to celebrate my achievement. I was paying for everything, treating them to premium steaks and fine wine. Halfway through the expensive dinner, right as I raised my glass and was about to announce my hard-earned promotion, Fallon stood up violently, her chair scraping the floor, and tapped her glass with a knife. "Everyone, I have huge, amazing news," she announced loudly, her eyes shining with manic excitement. "I have just been elected president of the Parent-Teacher Association at Hayes Elementary School." My mother gasped in pure delight, clutching her pearls. "Oh, Fallon. That is incredible news. You are a natural-born leader. The school is so lucky to have you." Declan immediately flagged down the waiter and ordered a bottle of overpriced champagne to toast her monumental success. For the rest of the night, they talked endlessly about upcoming bake sales, petty school board politics, and how vitally important Fallon's new volunteer role was for the local community. When the massive bill finally came, my mother looked directly at me with a blank expression. "Well, go ahead and pay the man, Sloan. You brought us all here." Nobody ever asked what my news was. I paid the exorbitant bill in total silence and drove home alone, crying quietly in the dark. I rinsed a fragile crystal goblet under the faucet, forcing myself to be careful not to grip it too tightly lest it shatter into 100 pieces in my bare hands. The most agonizing part of my existence in this family was not just the big, life-altering events of theft and overshadowing. It was the constant, everyday cruelty. Like today, forcing me to park 3 long blocks away in the freezing cold while Declan's obnoxious college buddies parked their leased trucks right in the spacious driveway. Earlier, when I first walked in, I heard Fallon telling her group of friends in the living room, "Oh, Sloan really does not mind the long walk. She needs the extra exercise anyway. She is really letting herself go lately, it is sad." I looked up from the soapy sink and caught my own reflection in the dark glass of the kitchen window. I was wearing a simple, comfortable cream sweater and tailored slacks. I did not need flashy designer logos or heavy makeup to prove my worth to the world. But in this shallow family, if you did not loudly flaunt your supposed wealth, you were nothing but trash. I was the sturdy, silent foundation they all eagerly stood on to look taller, and they deeply despised me for making them realize they needed a foundation in the first place. Sloane, are you deaf or just stupid? Fallon's sharp, nasal voice snapped me violently back to the present moment. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, her hands resting aggressively on her hips, her eyes glaring at me. I said we are ready for the main course. Bring the massive turkey out to the dining room. And do not drop it, it cost a fortune. I slowly dried my wet hands on a faded dish towel. I am not a hired caterer, Fallon. You and Declan can easily carry it out together. It is heavy. Her eyes widened in dramatic, mock horror. Excuse me? I have been running around this house all day hosting 30 people and making sure everything is perfect. You have been standing in here doing literally nothing but playing with soap. It is the very least you can do to contribute to this family. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted a hint of copper. I could have fought back. I could have caused a massive scene right then and there. But the rich smell of roasting meat and the loud, happy chatter filtering in from the dining room reminded me of exactly why I always stayed quiet. It is a truly terrifying realization when you finally understand that your own family does not love you. They only love what you can continually do for them. And the second you stop doing it, you immediately become the villain in their story. I grabbed the heavy, scalding roasting pan with thick oven mitts. The intense heat radiated painfully through the fabric, almost burning my palms, but I held on. I carried the massive turkey out into the bright dining room. The incredibly long table was a chaotic, beautiful mess of expensive silverware, lit taper candles, and loud, obnoxious relatives laughing with their mouths full. Kieran was still talking loudly about the shifting housing market trends. Aunt Sybil was complaining bitterly about how lazy the younger generation is. Declan was pouring himself yet another glass of red wine. I carefully set the heavy turkey down in the exact center of the table. No one stopped talking. No one said thank you. No one even looked at me. I walked quietly to my designated seat. It was at the very far end of the table, squeezed tightly and uncomfortably between a wobbly wooden high chair and a large decorative stone pillar. I had barely enough room to move my elbows to cut my food. Fallon sat at the head of the table, glowing under the warm candlelight, expertly playing the role of the perfect, wealthy hostess. I sat down and discreetly pulled my phone out of my pocket, hiding it carefully under the edge of the long linen tablecloth. I unlocked the screen using my fingerprint. My thumb hovered over a specific, highly encrypted file in my secure work drive. The file was clearly named Fallon Mortgage Deed Default. I stared intensely at the bold black letters on the digital document. The exact amount owed was $542,000. The tension in the crowded room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I took a deep, shaky breath, the massive secret burning a literal hole in my pocket. Why do I keep coming back to this toxic environment? Why do I keep letting them treat me this way? The answer was coming very soon, and I promised myself it was going to be breathtakingly ugly. The dining room was absolutely deafening. 30 people were loudly talking over each other, aggressively clinking heavy crystal glasses and scraping expensive silver forks against fine china plates. I sat silently in my cramped, claustrophobic corner, trying my best to make myself as physically small as possible to avoid drawing any unwanted attention. The air was thick and heavy with the smell of rich gravy, spilled wine, and an overwhelming sense of pretentious superiority. Kieran, sitting a few seats down from me, leaned forward heavily on his elbows, pointing his fork directly at Declan's face. Seriously, man, you got into this specific neighborhood at the absolute perfect time. The equity you are building in this property is phenomenal. I have wealthy clients begging me daily for a spacious layout exactly like this one. Tell me the truth, do you own this outright, or are you still paying off some massive loan to the bank? Declan laughed a high-pitched, nervous sound, glancing quickly at Fallon with panic in his eyes. Oh, you know how it is. Standard 30-year mortgage with a major bank. Nothing special. but we are making great progress on the principal every month. Fallon immediately smiled her perfect, practiced, camera-ready smile. We feel very blessed. Declan works so incredibly hard at his job to provide this beautiful, comfortable life for our family. I mean, just look at this gorgeous dining room. It is absolutely perfect for entertaining large groups. Not everyone has the luxury of space to host the entire extended family for the holidays. She shot a pointed, condescending look straight down the long table. It landed squarely on my face. My real penthouse downtown has a stunning open-concept dining area that could comfortably fit this entire massive table twice over, with floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. But I did not say a word. I just took a slow, deliberate sip of my iced water. I watched them desperately build their fragile house of cards, layer by layer, lie by lie, praying a strong wind would not blow it all down. My 8-year-old nephew, Hayes, was sitting directly across from me. He was wearing a tiny, expensive navy blazer that looked stiff and highly uncomfortable on a child his age. He had Fallon's sharp, calculating eyes and Declan's weak, receding chin. He was currently completely ignoring his food, using his heavy silver spoon to catapult mashed potatoes onto the clean hardwood floor. "Hayes, sweetie, please stop playing with your food," Maura said softly in her sweet grandmother voice, offering zero actual discipline or consequence for his terrible behavior. Hayes completely ignored her. He looked down at the plate of fresh green beans I had spent an hour preparing. They were beautifully roasted with sliced almonds and fresh garlic. He scrunched his nose in exaggerated disgust. "I do not want this disgusting green stuff. It looks like garbage from the trash can." "Just eat a little bit of the turkey, buddy," Declan said lazily, not even bothering to look up from the sports game playing on his phone under the table. Hayes angrily grabbed a large handful of the hot green beans and violently threw them across the table, scattering them everywhere. "I said I do not want it. Aunt Sloane made it, so it is probably cheap. Poor people garbage anyway." The entire table went dead quiet for a tense moment. A few older relatives looked over at me, waiting to see if I would react or discipline the child. I kept my face entirely blank, like a stone wall. I looked directly at Fallon, fully expecting her to finally step up and correct her wildly out-of-control son. Instead, she let out a light, breathy, amused laugh. "Oh, Hayes, try to be polite at the table," she said, though her tone was dripping with obvious amusement and pride. "Aunt Sloane tries her best with what she has. She just does not have the grocery budget for high-quality organic produce like we do." "It is fine, honey. You do not have to eat the cheap food if you do not want to." My mother nodded vigorously in agreement, chewing her turkey. "Sloane, you really should try shopping at the local farmer's market instead of those discount grocery stores. Your sister has a very delicate stomach and only eats organic." I felt a cold, terrifying rage settling deep into my bones. It was not a fiery, explosive, screaming anger. It was an icy, highly calculated fury. I slipped my hand under the heavy tablecloth again, tapping the bright screen of my phone. I opened the PDF document once more. I silently read the legal clauses I already knew perfectly by heart. For years ago, Declan's previous, highly touted business venture failed spectacularly, leaving a trail of unpaid debts. He owed massive amounts of money to angry suppliers. Their credit scores plummeted deep into the low 500s. No reputable bank in the entire country would approve them for a basic car loan, let alone a massive $500,000 mortgage. They were living in a cramped, moldy 2-bedroom apartment, facing an imminent eviction notice. Fallon came crawling to my apartment late at night, crying hysterically, begging on her hands and knees for my help. She swore up and down they had changed their spending habits. She swore Declan had a steady new job and just needed one last chance to provide for his kids. Because I am good at my job, I had the liquid capital sitting in my accounts. I bought this massive house in straight cash. I had Gideon draw up an ironclad private mortgage agreement. I am the bank. I legally own the deed to this property. They were legally obligated to pay me a set amount every single month, and after 5 years of consistent, on-time payments, I would generously transfer the deed to their names for the exact original purchase price, charging them almost zero interest. I gave them the financial gift of a lifetime, saving them from total ruin. And right now, at this very moment, they were exactly 60 days behind on those payments. I closed the file on my phone, the screen going dark, and looked back up at the table. Hayes was still glaring at me from across the table. The spoiled brat had learned everything he knew from watching his mother. He learned that I was nothing more than a convenient punching bag. He learned that my only value on this earth was what I could provide financially, and that I inherently deserved zero respect in return. "I am not hungry anymore," I said quietly, pushing my full plate away from the edge of the table. Fallon dramatically rolled her eyes, letting out a loud sigh. "God, Sloane, please do not start pouting right now. It ruins the festive vibe for everyone else. You are always so relentlessly negative." "I am not pouting. I just do not want to eat," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady and devoid of emotion. Kieran chimed in again, chewing loudly with his mouth wide open. "Just leave her alone, Fallon. She is probably just deeply intimidated by being around all this massive success. It is really hard being the one underachiever of the family when everyone else is doing so great." A loud chorus of cruel chuckles rippled around the large table. They were feeding off each other's toxic energy. The nasty pack mentality was in full, terrifying force. They desperately needed a weak target to feel good about their own miserable lives, and I was sitting right there in the corner. I looked up at the beautiful, sparkling crystal chandelier hanging directly above the center of the table. I paid for that chandelier in cash. I looked down at the expensive Brazilian hardwood floors their chairs were resting on. I paid for those floors. I took a deep breath, preparing to just quietly endure the rest of the agonizing meal, and then leave for good. I told myself I could easily survive just one more hour. Just one more hour of being the pathetic family joke, and then I could go back to my real, successful life and never look back. But Hayes was not finished seeking attention. He forcefully picked up his heavy, silver fork from his plate. It was dripping with thick, dark brown turkey gravy. He locked eyes with me, a nasty, cruel, incredibly adult smile stretching across his little face. Have you ever felt a moment slow down so much you can count the heartbeats? Have you ever watched a disaster happen right in front of you and known, with absolute, terrifying clarity, that nothing would ever be the same again? What happens in the next 10 seconds is the exact reason I systematically burned their perfect, fake world to the ground. Everything in the room began to move in brutal, agonizing slow motion. Hayes pulled his little arm back far behind his head, his small fingers tightly gripping the ornate, heavy handle of the silver fork. The dark gravy dripped off the tines, staining the pristine white linen tablecloth below him. Before I could even raise my hand to defend my face, he threw it with all the strength his little body possessed. The heavy piece of silverware flew across the narrow space separating us and struck me square in the chest. The physical impact was surprisingly sharp and painful. The cold metal clattered hard against my collarbone before tumbling down into my lap. Hot, greasy gravy splattered violently across my cream sweater, immediately leaving an ugly, dark brown stain right over my heart. I gasped loudly, the sudden, shocking heat of the gravy burning through the thin wool of my sweater and irritating my skin. I looked down at the ruined fabric, the mess spreading quickly, then slowly raised my eyes back up to look at the boy. Hayes aggressively pointed his finger straight at my face, his features twisted in a smug, victorious, deeply nasty grin. "Mom says you are just a servant," he yelled, his high-pitched voice cutting through the ambient noise of the dining room like a blaring siren. "You do not belong sitting at the main table. Go clean the kitchen, loser." The silence that immediately followed his outburst was deafening. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that forcefully sucks all the breathable air out of a room. For exactly 2 agonizing seconds, 30 people completely froze in place. Silver forks stopped halfway to open mouths. Expensive wine glasses hovered motionless in midair. I sat there, the hot grease seeping deeper into my skin, waiting. I waited for the natural, decent human reaction. I waited for my sister to gasp in shock, to leap up and snatch the boy by the arm, to apologize profusely for his horrific behavior. I waited for my mother to stand up and reprimand her grandson for physically assaulting an adult guest. Instead, a low, rumbling sound broke the tense silence. It was Declan. He was chuckling. That single chuckle broke the dam holding back the cruelty. My mother, Maura, quickly raised her linen napkin to her mouth to hide a giggle, her eyes crinkling in obvious amusement. Aunt Sybil let out a loud, undignified snort of laughter. And Fallon did not even flinch. She elegantly picked up her crystal wine glass, took a slow, deliberate sip of her expensive vintage, and smiled. It was a cold, calculating, deeply satisfying smirk. "Kids say the darndest things sometimes," Fallon said smoothly, waving her perfectly manicured hand dismissively as if a child throwing metal at a guest was totally normal. "He is just acting out because he is overly tired from the excitement. Honestly, Sloane, please do not be so incredibly dramatic about this. It is just gravy, it will wash out with a little club soda." I slowly looked around the massive table. My own family. People who shared my DNA. They were either openly laughing at my humiliation or awkwardly looking away, fully complicit in their cowardly silence. Not a single person offered me a napkin. Not one person asked if the hot gravy had burned me. "He threw a heavy piece of metal at me," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously low, calm register. "He called me a servant. He said those exact words because that is exactly what you teach him when the doors are closed." Fallon aggressively slammed her glass down on the table. The crystal rang sharply, silencing the remaining chuckles. "Oh, please. Stop playing the pathetic victim, Sloane. You are always so incredibly sensitive about everything. You walk around here with your sad, lonely little life, bringing everyone's mood down. Hayes is just repeating what he sees with his own eyes. You act like the hired help, so he naturally treats you like the hired help. Know your place. We are not equals in this family. You are sitting in my house, eating my expensive food. Show some basic respect for the people who host you." I looked at her. I really, truly looked at her for the first time in years. I saw the desperate, gnawing insecurity hiding right behind her heavy designer makeup. I saw the raw fear in Declan's eyes, poorly hidden behind his fake, macho confidence. I saw my mother's pathetic, shallow need to worship the fragile illusion of success at any cost. I did not scream. I did not cry. Crying was exactly what they all wanted to see. Crying would mean they had broken me, that they held true power over my emotions. Instead, a profound, eerie, beautiful calm washed over my entire body. It was the crystal-clear clarity of a frozen winter lake. The long, painful years of desperately trying to win their affection, the years of foolishly taking the high road, the years of silently enduring their relentless passive-aggressive torture, it all evaporated into thin air in a single instant. I stood up. The legs of my chair scraped loudly against the expensive hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the quiet room. I calmly picked up my napkin, wiped the worst of the hot grease off my chest, and dropped the badly stained cloth directly onto the center of my plate, covering my untouched food. "Where exactly do you think you are going?" my mother demanded, her tone shifting rapidly from amused to highly annoyed. "We have not even cut the pecan pie you brought yet." "I am leaving," I said simply, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "You are seriously ruining Thanksgiving dinner over a harmless joke from a child?" Fallon scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically for her audience. Typical Sloane. Always making everything about herself. "If you walk out that door right now, do not bother ever coming back." I did not look at her. I did not look at any of them ever again. I turned around on my heel and walked purposefully out of the dining room. I went straight to the hall closet, retrieved my heavy wool winter coat, and slipped it on over my ruined sweater. The heavy, warm fabric felt like a suit of armor settling onto my shoulders. I opened the heavy front door. The freezing November wind hit my face hard, but I did not feel the bitter cold at all. I felt incredibly alive. I felt a dangerous, thrilling sense of raw power surging through my veins. As I walked down the long, paved driveway, past the shiny, leased luxury SUVs of people who honestly thought they were infinitely better than me, I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. I walked the 3 long blocks to my car in total, peaceful silence. I unlocked the door, sat down in the cold driver's seat, and just stared blankly at the steering wheel for a full minute. The sickening smell of gravy still clung to me, a potent reminder of the humiliation I had just endured. My phone buzzed aggressively in my hand. A text message from Fallon. You are so pathetic. You deliberately embarrass me in front of my friends and Declan's family. Accept your reality, Sloane. We are not on the same level and we never will be. Stay in your lane and know your place. I read the cruel message twice. I let the hateful words sink deep into my mind. Accept your reality. Oh, Fallon. You have absolutely no idea what harsh reality is about to hit you. The real storm has not even started yet. The long drive back to the city was a quiet blur of passing streetlights and endless highway markers. The heater in my car blasted warm air directly onto my frozen hands, but the chill inside me was bone deep and entirely unshakable. By the time I finally pulled into the secure, gated underground garage of my luxury building, it was well past 10 o'clock at night. I swiped my key fob and rode the private, high-speed elevator all the way up to my penthouse. When the heavy metal doors slid open silently, the quiet, minimalist luxury of my real life greeted me. The massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the glittering city skyline. The entire space was massive, spotless, and entirely mine, paid for with my own sweat and tears. I threw my heavy coat onto an expensive Italian leather armchair and pulled the ruined, stained sweater over my head, tossing it directly into the trash can without a second thought. I did not want to attempt to wash it. I wanted it gone from my sight forever. I walked purposefully into my sleek home office and poured myself a generous glass of expensive scotch, neat. I sat down at my massive, custom oak desk and turned on my laptop. The bright blue light of the screen illuminated my face in the dark, silent room. My phone buzzed angrily on the desk again. Another text from Fallon. Mom is crying hysterically in the kitchen because you ruined the holiday for everyone. You owe every single person here a massive apology. You are deeply toxic. I picked up my phone, but I did not bother replying to her childish taunts. Instead, I scrolled quickly through my contacts and hit the call button for Blythe. Blythe was my former boss, a ruthless, brilliant, self-made woman who had mentored me in the cutthroat underwriting business. She was the only person on earth who knew the full truth about my toxic family and the heavy financial leash I had foolishly tied around their necks. She answered on the second ring, her voice raspy. Sloane? It is a major holiday. Who died? Nobody yet, I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of emotion. But I deeply need to kill something tonight. Blythe let out a low, impressed whistle. Thanksgiving dinner was really that bad, huh? What did the precious golden child do to you this time? I told her everything. I told her about the silver fork, the hot gravy, the cruel laughter, the unforgivable servant comment from an 8-year-old. I told her about the nasty text messages currently flooding my phone. I spoke clinically, without a single tear or crack in my voice, just laying out the cold, hard facts exactly like I was presenting a massive insurance claim to a board of directors. When I finally finished speaking, the line was dead quiet for a long, heavy moment. Then Blythe spoke, her voice laced with sharp, unyielding steel. Sloane, you're a senior underwriter. You assess massive risks every day. You ruthlessly enforce ironclad contracts. Why on earth are you letting a pathetic woman who cannot even balance a basic checkbook treat you like a dirty doormat in a house that you legally own? Because they are my family, I whispered into the phone, the old, tired excuse sounding incredibly pathetic even to my own ears. Family is nothing but a biological accident, Blythe snapped harshly. Respect is earned, Sloane. She explicitly called you a servant. She boldly told you to know your place. So, I highly suggest you show her exactly what your place is. You hold the paper, Sloane. Call the note. Cut the cancerous tumor out of your life before it kills you. I took a slow, burning sip of the scotch, letting the alcohol warm my throat. You're entirely right. I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding, a steady, heavy, powerful drumbeat in my chest. The years of hesitation were entirely gone. The misplaced guilt was completely gone. Fallon wanted me to know my place. I was going to gladly show her exactly where I stood in the food chain. I opened the active text thread with Fallon. I typed my response, my thumbs hitting the glass screen with precise, angry, calculated force. I do know my place. Check your $542,000 mortgage documents. I hit send. I did not wait to see if she was typing a reply. I immediately opened my secure email client and created a new, high-priority message addressed directly to Gideon, my ruthless real estate attorney. Gideon is a literal shark in a suit. He does not sleep. He just waits in the dark for blood in the water. Subject: urgent. Notice of default and acceleration. Fallon and Declan property. Gideon, I am officially authorizing the immediate activation of the acceleration clause for the private mortgage currently held on the suburban property. The borrowers are currently 60 days past due on their required monthly payments. Per the strict terms of our signed contract, I am legally calling the entire remaining loan balance of $542,000 due in full. They have exactly 10 days to remit payment in full, or we begin foreclosure and eviction proceedings immediately. No extensions of any kind. No negotiations. Please file the necessary legal paperwork with the county first thing in the morning and send the official notice to them via certified courier. Let the games begin. Best, Sloan. I clicked send. The email whooshed away into the digital ether. It was 11:30 at night. The die was officially cast. There was no taking it back now, even if I wanted to. I had just dropped a nuclear bomb straight onto my sister's perfect, fake, heavily curated life. I leaned back deeply in my leather chair, staring out at the millions of city lights twinkling in the darkness. I felt a terrifying, intoxicating rush of pure adrenaline. For years, I had quietly protected them from their own stupidity. I had absorbed their endless abuse to keep the peace. I had literally paid for the expensive roof over their heads while they spat directly in my face. But no more. At exactly 6 in the morning, my phone chimed loudly on the desk. It was a reply from Gideon. Legal documents prepared and officially filed with the county clerk. The certified courier is currently out for delivery. They will be officially served by 8 a.m. sharp. Prepare for impact. I smiled. A real, genuine, terrifying smile. I walked into my massive kitchen, started the expensive coffee maker, and prepared for the absolute best Friday of my entire life. Thank you for watching until the end of episode 2. If you're feeling triumphant and supportive of Sloane's decision, please comment, "I'm win" below. This is the special symbol for loyal viewers who have watched this far. I will like and reply to every comment containing the keyword "I'm win." Don't leave, because the real storm has only just begun. The sun rose over the city on Friday morning, casting a sharp, brilliant light across my penthouse. I woke up at 6 o'clock, feeling more rested and energized than I had in a decade. I went through my morning routine with profound precision. I brewed a cup of expensive dark roast coffee, took a long, hot shower, and put on my favorite tailored charcoal gray suit. I paired it with a pair of sleek, understated heels. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see the tired, invisible sister from Thanksgiving dinner. I saw the senior underwriter. I saw the woman who held the literal key to my sister's entire existence. I arrived at my corporate office building downtown by 7:30. The firm occupies the top 3 floors of a massive glass and steel tower. It is an environment built entirely on money, power, and strict contracts. It is my world. I sat down at my expansive desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing commercial surety bonds worth tens of millions of dollars. The world outside my office window was moving fast, but inside, everything was quiet. At exactly 8:15, my cell phone began to vibrate violently on the polished wood of my desk. I glanced at the screen. 14 missed calls in the span of 3 minutes. 10 from Fallon. 3 from Maura. 1 from Declan. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the phone dance across the desk. I was not going to answer Fallon. Let her panic. Let her scream into the void. When the phone lit up again with Declan's name, I finally reached out and swiped the green button. Sloan? Declan's voice cracked the second he spoke. He sounded breathless, like he had just sprinted a mile. His usual fake, overly confident tone was utterly gone, replaced by raw, unadulterated terror. "Sloan, what the hell is going on?" "Good morning, Declan," I replied, my voice smooth, cold, and professional. A man in a suit just knocked on our door. He handed us a thick stack of legal papers. "Sloan, the papers say our house is in default. The legal notice says we owe $542,000 in 10 days or we are being evicted." Declan was speaking so fast his words were blending together. He was hyperventilating. "Our bank called right after. Our accounts are frozen. Sloan, there is a massive mistake. The papers say you are the lien holder. You are the bank. What is this?" I leaned back in my leather chair, staring out at the clear blue sky. "There is no mistake, Declan. I am your mortgage holder. You do not have a bank mortgage. You never did. You have a private mortgage with me. And you are currently 60 days late on your payments. I am legally calling the loan due." The line went dead quiet. I could hear his shallow, ragged breathing through the speaker. For a man who loved to boast about his immense success and his beautiful suburban palace, the reality of his profound failure was crushing him in real time. "What do you mean you own the house?" he finally whispered, his voice trembling. I sighed, a tired, heavy sound. "Let us take a quick trip down memory lane, Declan. For years ago, your HVAC supply business went under because you mismanaged your funds. Your credit score tanked to 520. You and Fallon were facing eviction from a moldy 2-bedroom apartment. No financial institution in this country would lend you a single dollar. Fallon came to my apartment, crying on her knees, begging for a miracle. So, I bought that massive house. I paid for it in straight cash. I drew up the private mortgage documents, which you both signed in front of a notary. I gave you the lowest interest rate legally possible. I saved your entire family from the streets. But I thought you just helped with the down payment," Declan stammered, sounding like a confused child. "Fallon told me you just loaned us $20,000 for the down payment, and the rest was through a private lender she found online." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "She lied to you, Declan. She lied to protect her fragile ego because she could not stomach the fact that her younger, boring sister was infinitely more successful than her. I own every single brick of that house. You are essentially my tenants with a very generous option to buy. An option you just voided by failing to pay me for 2 consecutive months." "Sloan, please," Declan begged, his voice cracking loudly. "You cannot do this. We do not have $542,000. If you foreclose, we lose everything. We lose all the equity. We will be homeless. You cannot do this over a stupid argument at Thanksgiving dinner. It was just a joke." My grip on the phone tightened, my knuckles turning white. "This is not about a joke, Declan. This is about 60 days of missed payments. This is about years of being treated like a worthless piece of trash by people who sleep under a roof that I provided. Your son threw hot gravy at my chest and called me a servant. He did that because you and Fallon taught him that I am beneath you. He is just an 8-year-old kid." Declan yelled, desperation bleeding into his words. "And you are a 38-year-old man who just realized he is a massive failure," I shot back, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You have 10 days, Declan. Start packing your boxes. You might want to ask Kieran if he knows any cheap apartments for rent." I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the desk. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the immense, overpowering surge of adrenaline. The execution had begun. The fake reality they had so carefully constructed was burning to ashes, and I was holding the match. By noon, the inevitable happened. The receptionist at the main lobby of my firm called my office line. Her voice was uncharacteristically tight and nervous. "Miss Sloan, there are 2 women down here in the lobby demanding to see you. One of them is crying very loudly and the other is screaming at the security guards. They claim they are your family. Send security to escort them to conference room B," I instructed calmly. "I will be down in 5 minutes." I took my time. I slowly gathered a specific file folder from my locked drawer, smoothed out my suit jacket, and walked out of my office. I walked down the long, quiet hallway and took the glass elevator down to the second floor. Conference Room V is a massive, intimidating space. It has floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking the bustling city street below, a long mahogany table, and extremely expensive leather chairs. It is designed to make opposing counsel feel small. Today, it was going to serve a different purpose. When I opened the heavy glass door, the chaos hit me like a physical wave. Fallon was pacing frantically back and forth, her face blotchy and red, her expensive mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. She was wearing a designer trench coat, looking utterly disheveled. My mother, Maura, was standing near the head of the table, her face twisted in a mask of furious indignation. Two large security guards stood silently by the door, their hands resting near their radios. "How dare you?" Maura screamed the second I walked into the room. She pointed a trembling, manicured finger at my face. "How dare you send men to your sister's house to terrorize her family? Have you lost your mind?" I walked calmly to the opposite side of the long mahogany table. I did not sit down. I placed my file folder on the polished wood and looked directly at my mother. "I sent legal couriers to deliver a standard notice of default," I said, keeping my voice perfectly even and professional. "Fallon is 60 days delinquent on her financial obligations. The law does not care about family trees, Mom." Fallon slammed her hands down on the table, her eyes wild with panic. "You are lying. You are trying to steal my house. I have built that home for my children. You are just a jealous, bitter spinster trying to ruin my perfect life because you have nothing of your own." I let her scream. I let the echoes of her shrill voice bounce off the glass walls. When she finally ran out of breath, I slowly opened the file folder. I pulled out a thick stack of papers. "This is the official deed of trust," I said, sliding a heavy, watermarked document across the long table toward them. "It bears my legal name as the sole lien holder. This is the promissory note you signed 4 years ago, Fallon. And this is the payment ledger showing exactly $0 received for the months of September and October." Maura stared at the papers, her eyes darting frantically over the bold legal text. She looked up at me, her face pale. "Sloan, what is this? I thought you just helped them with a small loan for the closing costs." "Fallon lied to you, Mom," I said smoothly. Just like she lied to Declan. She could not bear the deep humiliation of admitting that her boring, invisible sister had to buy her a house to save her from the streets. "She has been paying me a monthly mortgage for 4 years. Or rather, she was paying me until she suddenly stopped." Maura slowly turned her head to look at Fallon. The illusion of her perfect golden child was cracking right in front of her eyes. "Fallon, is this true?" she whispered. "Do you not own the house?" Fallon burst into fresh, loud tears, covering her face with her hands. "We hit a rough patch, Mom. Declan's commissions were low. We needed breathing room. It is just 2 months. She is my sister, she should be understanding. We are family." I pulled one final piece of paper from the folder. It was a printed photograph. I slid it across the table. It was a screenshot of Fallon's Instagram page from exactly 3 weeks ago. In the photo, Fallon was smiling brightly, holding up a brand new, highly exclusive designer handbag. "You bought a $6,000 Chanel bag 21 days ago, Fallon," I stated coldly, my voice cutting through her loud sobbing like a sharp knife. "You threw a lavish, catered Halloween party that cost at least $3,000. You lease a luxury SUV that costs $800 a month. You did not hit a rough financial patch. You simply decided that paying the person you consider a servant was not a priority. You chose to buy a leather purse instead of keeping a roof over your children's heads." Maura stared at the photograph of the Chanel bag, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The sheer audacity, the blatant irresponsibility of it all, was finally sinking in. She had always defended Fallon because she believed Fallon was a victim of circumstance. But the physical evidence on the table was impossible to ignore. "You are a monster, Sloan," Fallon spat, wiping her nose with the back of her expensive sleeve. "You set me up. You waited for the perfect moment to humiliate me. I will fight this in court. I will tell everyone what a cruel, heartless bitch you truly are." I will ruin your reputation. I am going to post everything on Facebook. Everyone will know you are trying to make your own nephew homeless. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the cool mahogany table. Please do, Fallon. Go to Facebook. Tell the entire world. But remember one crucial detail. A notice of default is a matter of public record. The moment you try to play the victim online, my attorney will happily post the legal documents proving you are nothing but a broke, defaulting debtor living in a house you do not own. I stood up straight, signaling the end of the meeting. The security guard stepped forward, gently but firmly gesturing toward the glass door. You have 9 days left to find $542,000, I said softly. I strongly suggest you stop crying and start packing your precious designer bags. I turned my back on them and walked out of the conference room, leaving my mother staring in stunned silence at the shattered pieces of her favorite daughter's fake life. The digital war began precisely at 7 o'clock that evening. I was sitting on my velvet sofa, drinking a glass of wine, when my phone started vibrating endlessly. The notifications were coming in so fast they blurred together. Fallon had executed her threat. She had taken to social media. I opened Facebook. Right at the top of my feed was a massive, 3-page essay written by Fallon. She had tagged over 50 relatives and close friends. The post was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. She claimed that due to a minor, temporary financial setback out of their control, her cruel, money-hungry sister was brutally foreclosing on their beloved family home. She wrote about how much her children loved their bedrooms, how she had poured her heart and soul into the garden, and how she was terrified her kids would be sleeping in a cold shelter by Christmas. She conveniently left out the Chanel bag, the fact that I bought the house with my own money, and the Thanksgiving incident where her son threw a fork at my chest. The comments section was already a raging inferno. People who had not spoken to me in 5 years were suddenly experts on my moral character. Aunt Sybil left a comment calling me a greedy, soulless demon. Cousins I barely knew were typing paragraphs about how families should always forgive financial debts. The flying monkeys were swarming, blindly attacking on command. My phone rang loudly. It was Aunt Sybil. I answered the call, pressing the phone to my ear. Sloan, how can you sleep at night? Sybil screamed immediately, her voice shrill and piercing. You are kicking a mother and her young babies out into the freezing cold. Your father would be spinning in his grave if he saw what you have become. You call off those vicious lawyers right now. I let her yell for a full minute. When she paused to take a breath, I spoke. Aunt Sybil, if you care so deeply about Fallon's housing situation, she currently owes $542,000. I accept certified checks or direct wire transfers. Shall I email you the routing numbers so you can pay her debt? Sybil sputtered, coughing loudly. What? That is absurd. I do not have that kind of money. Then I strongly suggest you mind your own business, I replied calmly and hung up the phone. I took another sip of my wine. The social media outrage was loud, but it was built on a foundation of sand. I texted Gideon, my shark of an attorney. Gideon, the borrower has chosen to take the matter to the court of public opinion. She is making false claims regarding the nature of the debt. You have my full authorization to clarify the public record. Gideon replied less than a minute later. Consider it handled. Enjoy the show. 10 minutes later, Gideon's official law firm page posted a comment directly under Fallon's tearful essay. Gideon did not argue. He did not call her names. He simply operated with cold, brutal, undeniable facts. As the legal representatives for the lien holder of the property in question, we must correct the public record. The current resident, Fallon, does not own this home and never has. She is currently residing in a property purchased entirely in cash by our client 4 years ago. The resident has defaulted on a private, zero-interest mortgage agreement, failing to make payments for over 60 days while maintaining a lavish lifestyle. Attached is the public notice of default filed with the county clerk. Our client has shown extraordinary generosity for years and will now proceed with lawful eviction due to breach of contract. Gideon attached the PDF of the county filing. It was a public document, visible to everyone. The numbers were right there in black and white. The shift in the digital atmosphere was instantaneous and violent. The outrage directed at me evaporated, replaced immediately by intense shock and brutal mockery directed at Fallon. The very same relatives who had just called me a demon began deleting their comments in a panic. Then, the ultimate betrayal happened. Kieran, the flashy real estate cousin who had mocked me at Thanksgiving dinner, posted a new comment. Wait a minute. Fallon, you have been acting like a rich snob for 4 years, bragging about your massive equity, and you do not even own the damn house? You are living off Sloane's charity and you still let your kid throw food at her? That is truly pathetic. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Kieran directly to my personal number. Sloane. I am so sorry about what I said at dinner. I had no idea you were a heavy hitter in the real estate game. You played that incredibly well. Let me know if you want to list the house after you evict her. I can get you top dollar. I laughed out loud. The hypocrisy was staggering, but it was deeply satisfying. The family had turned on Fallon like a pack of starving wolves. They did not turn on her because she had treated me badly. They turned on her because they realized she was broke and I was the one with the actual power. In their shallow world, money is the only morality that matters. The social media humiliation broke Fallon completely. For the next 2 days, the house was dead silent. Declan did not call. My mother did not text. They were drowning in the sudden, crushing reality of their impending doom. On the evening of the 9th day, a massive rainstorm rolled into the city. The rain lashed heavily against the thick glass of my penthouse windows. I was reading a book in my living room when the security intercom on my wall chimed loudly. I pressed the button. Miss Sloane, the doorman's voice came through the speaker. Your sister is down here in the lobby. She is soaking wet. She is begging to come up. She says it is a matter of life and death. I looked at the clock. It was 9 p.m. Tomorrow morning, the final foreclosure paperwork would be submitted to the judge. The executioner's block was ready. Send her up, I said, my voice steady. I walked to the heavy mahogany front door of my penthouse and waited. The quiet hum of the private elevator echoed in the hallway. The doors slid open. The climax of my long, painful journey was finally standing right in front of me. Fallon looked like a ghost. The woman standing outside my penthouse door was entirely unrecognizable from the arrogant, perfectly styled hostess I had seen just 9 days ago at Thanksgiving. Her expensive designer trench coat was soaked through, dripping muddy water onto the plush carpet of the hallway. Her hair hung in wet, stringy clumps around her pale face. She wore no makeup, revealing the deep, dark circles under her bloodshot eyes. She looked small. She looked profoundly broken. She stared into my penthouse, her eyes wide as she took in the massive living space, the expensive modern art on the walls, and the sweeping views of the city. The reality of my wealth, the stark contrast between my quiet success and her loud, fraudulent failure, hit her like a physical blow. She stumbled forward, gripping the heavy doorframe to keep from falling over. Sloane, she whispered, her voice hoarse and raw. Please, let me come inside. I stepped back, allowing her to enter. I did not offer her a towel. I did not offer her a warm drink. I simply stood in the center of the vast living room, folding my arms across my chest, waiting. She took 3 shaky steps onto the hardwood floor and suddenly collapsed. She fell directly onto her knees, her wet coat pooling around her on the floor. It was a pathetic, shocking sight. The golden child, the favorite daughter, kneeling at the feet of the invisible sister. I am sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her trembling hands. I am so sorry, Sloane. Please do not take my home. Please do not put my babies on the street. We have nowhere else to go. Declan's credit is ruined. My business is failing. We have exactly $400 in our checking account. We are entirely bankrupt. I stared down at her. Part of me, the old, weak Sloane who desperately craved her sister's love, wanted to bend down and hug her. But the new Sloane, the senior underwriter who assessed risk and demanded accountability, stood firm like a pillar of stone. Why did you do it, Fallon? I asked, my voice echoing coldly in the large room. Why did you spend 4 years living off my money, sleeping under a roof I bought, only to treat me like garbage? Why did you teach your son to call me a servant?" Fallon rocked back and forth on her knees, her sobs echoing loudly. "Because I knew," she choked out, gasping for air. "I knew you were always better than me. You were smarter. You worked harder. You built a real career while I played pretend. When you bought the house, it destroyed my pride. Every time I looked at you, I felt like a massive failure. So I had to push you down. I had to convince myself and everyone else that you were beneath me, because if I admitted the truth, I would have nothing left. I called you a servant to hide the fact that I was the one begging for scraps." Her confession hung heavily in the air. It was the ugly, naked truth. She did not hate me because I was a failure. She hated me because my success illuminated her own profound emptiness. "Look at me, Fallon," I commanded sharply. She slowly raised her tear-streaked face, looking up at me with terrified, bloodshot eyes. "Repeat the words," I demanded. "Repeat exactly what you told me at the Thanksgiving table when your son threw a fork at my chest." She flinched as if I had struck her. "Sloan, please no." "Repeat it," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "Or I call Gideon right now and tell him to expedite the eviction." She swallowed hard, her chest heaving. "Know your place," she whispered, the words sounding absurd and pathetic coming from a woman kneeling on the floor. "We are not equals." I nodded slowly. "You are absolutely right, Fallon. We are not equals. We have never been equals. And today, you finally know your place." I walked over to my desk and picked up a thick legal folder I had prepared earlier that afternoon. I walked back and dropped it heavily onto the floor right in front of her knees. "I am not foreclosing on the house," I said. Fallon let out a massive, ragged gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my God. Sloan, thank you. Thank you so much, I promise." "Shut up and listen," I snapped, cutting her off instantly. "I am not foreclosing because I refuse to be the reason your children sleep in a cheap motel. But the free ride is permanently over. That folder contains a massive loan modification agreement. I am raising your interest rate to the maximum penalty amount allowed by state law. Your monthly payment is increasing to $3,500 a month." Her eyes widened in sheer panic. "Sloan, we cannot afford that." "Declan barely makes enough. You will afford it," I interrupted coldly, because the contract also includes a mandatory wage garnishment clause. "Gideon will submit this directly to Declan's employer. The money will automatically be deducted from his paycheck before he ever sees it. You will not have the option to buy Chanel bags or host lavish parties anymore. You are going to live on a strict, miserable budget for the next 10 years until this debt is fully paid. If you miss a single payment, if Declan tries to quit his job to avoid the garnishment, the eviction begins automatically without any notice. Do you understand me?" She stared at the folder, realizing the brutal reality of the chains I was locking around her wrists. She was not losing the house, but she was losing her entire fake lifestyle. "Yes," she whispered brokenly. "I understand." "I am not finished," I continued, my voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet register. "Christmas dinner is in exactly 3 weeks at Uncle Robert's house. You and Declan are going to attend. Before anyone touches the food, you are going to stand up. You are going to publicly apologize to me in front of the entire extended family. You are going to admit that I own your home, that you lied to them, and that you are a defaulting debtor. If you try to back out, if you lie, I will take the house on Christmas morning." Fallon squeezed her eyes shut, fresh tears leaking out. The public humiliation would destroy whatever tiny shred of social standing she had left. But she had zero leverage. She had zero choices left. "Okay," she sobbed, bowing her head toward the floor. "I will do it. Sign the papers, Fallon. And then get out of my penthouse. You are making my floors wet." 3 weeks later, the air was bitterly cold and thick with snow. Christmas dinner was being hosted at Uncle Robert's sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city. For the past 4 weeks, the entire family dynamic had undergone a massive, seismic shift. The social media exposure orchestrated by Gideon had done its job perfectly. The invisible sister was suddenly the most important person in the room. When I arrived at Uncle Robert's house, wearing a stunning emerald green silk dress, The reaction was immediate and entirely surreal. Robert himself rushed to the front door to take my coat, offering me a glass of expensive champagne before I even stepped into the living room. Aunt Sybil, the same woman who had screamed at me over the phone, suddenly found herself incredibly interested in my corporate career, aggressively complimenting my shoes and asking for financial advice. It was sickening. It was fake. But it was raw power, and I finally understood why Fallon had chased this feeling so desperately. The dining table was massive, seating over 30 people. This time, I was not relegated to the cramped corner next to the high chair. Uncle Robert insisted I sit in the place of honor, right near the head of the table. 15 minutes after everyone had sat down, Fallon and Declan quietly entered the dining room. The contrast from Thanksgiving was jarring. Declan looked aged, his shoulders slumped heavily in defeat. Fallon was not wearing designer silk or heavy, glamorous makeup. She wore a simple, faded gray sweater and plain black pants. She looked exactly like what she truly was, a terrified woman buried under a mountain of heavy debt. The loud chatter in the room instantly died down as they walked in. Everyone knew what was coming. The tension was electric. Fallon walked to the empty space near the fireplace. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes focused firmly on the floor. Her hands were shaking violently by her sides. Declan stood slightly behind her, staring blankly at the wall. "Excuse me," Fallon began, her voice weak and trembling. The room was so quiet you could hear the snow hitting the window panes outside. I have something I need to say to everyone. But mostly, I need to say it to Sloane." She finally raised her head. Her eyes met mine. There was no defiance left in them. Only deep, profound humiliation. "For the past 4 years, I have lied to all of you," Fallon said, her voice cracking loudly. "I told everyone that Declan and I were highly successful. I bragged about our massive home and our equity. The truth is, 4 years ago, we were entirely bankrupt. We were facing eviction. Sloane stepped in and used her own hard-earned money to buy the house in cash. She saved us from being homeless. She gave us a private mortgage out of the kindness of her heart." A low murmur rippled through the older relatives. Hearing the brutal truth spoken out loud by the golden child herself was deeply shocking to them. Instead of being grateful, Fallon continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "I grew fiercely jealous. I was so incredibly insecure about my own failures that I decided to punish Sloane for her immense success. I took her money, I lived in her house, and I treated her like garbage. I spent money on expensive luxury items while I actively defaulted on my debt to her. At Thanksgiving, I allowed my son to physically throw food at her and call her a servant. I taught my son to disrespect the only person keeping a roof over his head." Fallon wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice dropping to a broken whisper. "Sloane is not a servant. She is a highly successful, brilliant woman. I am the failure. I am the fraud. Sloane, I am deeply, profoundly sorry for what I have done to you. I do not deserve your mercy, but I thank you for not putting my family on the street." She finished speaking and lowered her head, waiting for my response. The entire room turned their heads to look at me, waiting to see what the executioner would do. I looked at Fallon. I looked at Declan. Then I looked across the table at little Hayes. He was staring down at his empty plate, looking confused and scared. I took a slow sip of my water, placing the crystal glass gently on the table. "Thank you for your honesty, Fallon," I said clearly, my voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "Apology accepted. Let us eat." The spell was broken. The room slowly, awkwardly returned to life. Silverware began clinking. Low conversations started up again. But the hierarchy of the family had been permanently rewritten in stone. Fallon quietly took a seat at the very far end of the table, sitting exactly where I had sat just a few weeks prior. Throughout the dinner, I felt a deep, strange sense of peace. For years, I had dreamed of a dramatic, explosive revenge. I had imagined screaming at them, burning their house down, walking away as they begged for mercy. But sitting there, watching Fallon silently pick at her food, carrying the heavy, invisible chains of a crushing 30-year debt and total public humiliation, I realized the true nature of power. True revenge is not explosive. It is cold. It is clinical. It is simply forcing a liar to live in the harsh, unforgiving light of reality. I did not take her house. I took away her illusion. I took away her unearned pride. And in doing so, I finally set myself entirely free from their toxic grip. I no longer cared if my mother loved me more. I no longer cared what Kieran thought of my car. I knew exactly who I was, and more importantly, they finally knew it too. Lawyers and friends had told me I was being too soft by not kicking them out. They told me I should have sold the property, taken the massive profit, and cut them out of my life permanently. Sometimes, sitting in my quiet, beautiful penthouse, looking out at the city skyline, I wonder if they were right. But then I think about Fallon, waking up every single morning in a house she knows she does not own, watching her husband's paycheck disappear into my bank account, knowing she can never, ever pretend to be better than me again. So, I have to ask all of you watching this. Did I make the right call? Was leaving her trapped in that house with a massive, punishing debt and a destroyed reputation of fate worse than making her homeless? Or was I still being too kind to a sister who actively tried to destroy my spirit? I want to know what you would have done in my shoes. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this emotional story. If you found this plot twist truly satisfying and want to support the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next dramatic family stories. Your support is a huge motivation for me to continue bringing you the best quality stories. See you in the next video.